Right. So, in reference to the Spring Boot itself is concerned, wherein we discussed earlier about in the last session about the Spring Boot part, right? So, Spring Boot part. So, today I'm going to discuss about uh, Spring Boot. What are the newly added features and all everything. So, in this regard, today we are going to discuss about one of the feature majorly used to work on the Spring Boot, right? So because whatever the kind of dependencies we have, right? So whatever the kind of uh, Spring implementation are we doing, right? So Spring Boot implementation is concerned. One of the feature called Spring Boot starters is what something which I am discussing. So because when it comes to the Spring Boot, as we wants to need to configure it, right? So if you want to need to configure all the dependencies which are required in our pom.xl, right? So over here you can see, right? So yeah, so pom.xml. So if you want to configure all the dependencies which are required in pom.xml, whatever the Spring Boot starters which aggregate common groupings for all the dependencies into the single starter. At the same time, what are the dependencies which can be added to the projects uh, when we are implementing those using Maven or Gradle build, right? So all these things will be included upon. In this regard, so when it comes to the Spring Boot starter itself is concerned, this is what something which normally we write, right? So when we start with the project, whatever the project are we going to create? So as in when I mentioned you, because we need to configure all the dependencies, so that dependencies we need to create where we need to provide a dependency for using the group ID number, where Spring Framework dot boot, right? So group ID number has to be provided. It's not only about the group ID, but we need to provide the artifact ID number, wherein this connecting with an extension of .jdbc. Now we need to provide the version as well, right? So assume that I have taken a version of 1.5.3 release version we have taken. So in the first phase, this is what something which normally we need to implement. The next, when it comes to the dependency, another dependencies we are creating. So wherein we have to mention the group ID number where it leads to organization Spring Framework boot, right? So wherein we need to do for testing purposes, right? So because implementation, integration, wherein if you want to build a project using this Maven or something, right? So Maven building, wherein we need to perform the testing part, so that we have to create an artifact ID number, where Spring Boot starter test artifact ID number has to be given. At the same release, whatever the release version we have taken for the Spring Boot, the same thing will be continued over here. The next, when it comes to the other dependencies, where we need to be taken the same group ID number for Spring Framework boot. When it comes to the artifact ID, we have to take starter with. This is the ID number we have to be taken into consideration. So these are the three major dependencies you can see when it comes to the Spring Boot starter, one of the main feature under Spring 4, right? So one of the main feature which normally we have to take. One is about JDBC Connect. The starter of JDBC Connect is what something we have to take. Next, Spring Boot starter.test is something which we have to be taken. The next we need to take Spring Boot starter web. So these are the three major dependencies which we need to be created when we are working for the project, especially when you want to be added any kind of dependencies to the project. Uh, for that, of course, we use Maven or as well as Gradle and all everything to build this. Right. So this is all about one of the main feature under this is called Spring Boot Starter is all about. So that tomorrow I'm going to discuss about one more feature. Thank you.